This is Matthew Waterson, voice of Douglas 042, and you're watching the Codec.
What's up, ladies and gentlemen? Daly here, back with another interview for you. Today, I'm joined by Matthew Waterson. How are you doing today, sir?
Great, thank you. Glad to be here.
Thank you. And also joined by our co-host, Corrupt Ronan. Alex, how you doing, sir?
Pretty good. What's up, guys? I know people are going to say, why is he on camera this time? I explained to the folks here that I'm kind of under the weather a little bit, and haven't had a lot of time to prepare visually for this interview, but you can see these guys and their amazing beards on camera besides me, as somebody who can't grow one to save his life. And I also want to thank Matthew as well for joining us today. Definitely appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Now, you know that everybody comes here to see you, man. That's what my comment section always says. Where's Alex? How come Alex isn't on this interview? Well, here he is. We're back. So this interview coming off the tales of our interview with Jen Taylor and Steve Downs, voices in the Halo series. Matthew here plays Douglas 042 in the Halo Wars series, as well as the smartass Marine in Halo Infinite. We're going to talk a little bit about that later. But to get started, Matthew, tell us a little bit about you, kind of where you grew up, how you got into voice acting, and kind of what your first role was.
Sure. I sort of grew up splitting my time between the US and the UK. My dad's American, my mum's English. And so after university, I went to drama school, then went to New York to do theater, film, TV, whatever I had the opportunity to do, and was doing mostly theater, and started doing voiceover and found that I loved doing voiceover, and it pays a lot better than theater. And whereas in theater, I can do what I can do looking the way I can look, in voiceover, I kind of get to do anything that I can sound like. And so at the time that I was there, I started doing more and more voiceover until there came a point where I just realized that voiceover was where my career was going to be, which I was thrilled about, and switched into voiceover full time probably about 8 years ago now.
Wow.
Yeah, very cool. I think the last time we spoke, for some of the people already know kind of what happened. We spoke to Matthew last week. We had an issue with the audio recording on my side, so he's rejoining us here for another interview. You talked a little bit about the kind of step off point for you in voice acting, being that of the Order. You had done some stuff, prior to that. Tell us when you kind of realized that voice acting was going to be kind of your full-time thing.
Sure. Yeah, I've been doing voice stuff in New York, but that it runs the gamut. I'm lucky I get to do everything from sort of commercial and promo and video games and audiobooks and animation and all that kind of stuff. So I've been doing a lot of different things, and I think I've done a couple of little things for games here and there, but I got a phone call from my representatives that there was this game out that was actually casting out in California and was local only. So if I was willing to get myself there and back for a job, for the job, if I booked it, they could submit me because they were having trouble casting it. I said, yep, sure, fine. So I recorded an audition for it, was asked to come out to LA to do a callback for it, and did. And that was the game The Order 1886. And so that was originally, from what we were told, going to be, I don't know, like 6 or 7 days of recording spread over a couple of weeks. So I thought, okay, I'll, go out and be in LA for a couple of weeks and do it and then head back. And the way that project sort of grew, it ended up being me going out for 2 or 3 days at a time, about every month for, I think it was like 14 or 16 months. Like it went on for a long, long time.
Wow.
And so I was just back, and for the first 6 months of it, I was back and forth from New York to California. And then I had been kind of thinking about moving back to California anyway, because I had been told by my agent that the next sort of thing for me to get into in voiceover was going to be animation and video games, and most of those were going to be done out of Los Angeles.
Right.
So I thought, okay, well, this is a good motivation to do it, and found that it was the first time I'd done performance capture. It was the first time I'd done a big game like that. And it was so much fun. I enjoyed it so much. I enjoyed the process of it. It was like, that was an amazing game, because as Rue, the guy who ran the studio and was the creative force behind the game, was explaining it, and as they showed us images and things as they were putting it together, we knew visually it was just going to be an amazing game.
Right.
And as he described like what they were trying to do and what their plans were and how they were trying to work it and things like that, it sounded amazing. It looked amazing. they had wonderful people. Like, he got the screenwriter who won an Emmy for writing the John Adams miniseries for HBO to come and write the thing. It was, and you know, he was around to get to chat with and stuff. So it was about as good a first experience of doing motion capture, doing performance capture for a AAA game that I could have asked for. And it made it really easy to go, well, if this is what the job is, sure, I'll come and do this. This is great. This is well paid, and it's a lot of fun, and you know, motion capture and performance capture is really, really cool, and is something which had always looked fun and also a little intimidating. But once you actually get in and start doing it, you find that, especially if you've had theater training, you go, oh, I get this. This is easy. I know how to make this work.
Right.
And so that was kind of my launching off point into into voiceover full time, and also into moving out back to the West Coast to get into games and animation and stuff like that. So that was the first big game that I did, and was just a blast. And I was ignorant at the time. Like, I didn't know a lot of the cast members who were coming in and doing bits and pieces on it. So, you know, that was shooting at Sony stages down just north of San Diego. So when we were shooting there, we were staying at a hotel there for a few days, you know, around it. So we were around people the whole time. So, you know, I didn't know at the time what, you know, Yuri Lowenthal's background was. I just met Yuri and was like, oh, you're cool. I didn't know what Liam O'Brien's background was. I just met Liam and was like, oh, you're cool. And so you know, once I started getting into the industry more and going, oh, there were some really, really good people on that. And,
there sure was.
You know, Graham McTavish, who was in it, who was lovely. And I like realized, I was like, oh, you're on Outlander. And Graham, of course, now is in everything. He's one of those people who shows up in everything in the world. But the other sort of 4 main cast members of it, the studio had explicitly looked for people who had theater training and so would be able to do performance capture, but didn't have a lot of performance capture credits, so that they were kind of new and looked kind of different. And they didn't use our faces necessarily for the models. Mine ended up being really similar, just because like the 4 actors who they used to put together to make it turned out to be 4 actors who type-wise look very kind of similar to me. So like that's one where people go, well, they used your face, right? And I go, no, they actually had built that before I showed up. And then I just went, oh, that kind of looks like if they had done a capture of my face and then just tweaked it a little bit. That makes sense. So that was about as good a first experience as you could ask for.
Sounds like it.
The Lord Chancellor perhaps speaks too harshly. He would do well to remember that Sir Percival's force did uncover evidence of a rebel effort against the...
Circumstantial evidence.
I think my follow-up to that would be, and I didn't notice this when we talked about it the first time, is you mentioned when you originally were going out there to try and be cast for it, you had to go out there, right, to audition for it. Was that scary for you to kind of make a trip that far, not knowing that you're going to get that job, or is that something you had just kind of learned comes with the territory?
A little bit of both. It wasn't as scary for me as it might have been, because I had lived in Los Angeles for so much of my life, and I had friends out there. I had work stuff out there, or out here now. I had friends out here. I had work stuff out here already. At the time, I still had some business stuff out here. So I kind of used it as I'll just do a trip to LA anyway to see people and to do a couple of things, and I'll factor it in, and I'll get to write the whole thing off as a tax write-off.
There you go.
And so it was scary in terms of, I've never done this before. This seems really cool. The callback for it was on Sony's Mocap stage on their Culver City lot, which is this amazing, you know, studio lot they have, which has a lot of the houses and things that you see in, like, I think there's a house in it which was used as like the exterior for like Gone with the Wind and stuff like that. Wow. It's just in the middle of town on this lot. So there's all of this amazing stuff. And sort of going in to do that and going onto a performance capture stage for the very first time was really cool, and also a bit of oh crap, how do I not screw anything up? Because you know that, like, any stage you walk onto, everything costs a lot of money. But you walk onto a performance capture stage and everything costs a lot of money.
Yeah.
So you're like, how do I make sure I don't accidentally break something? Especially when they're like, well, we're going to put you in all this gear, and then we need to see you move. So we need to see you walk back and forth, and then we need to see you run and jump a little bit and go down and you're going, okay, but if I roll over, am I going to break stuff and be charged $20,000 for this thing on my back? Or if I tear the suit, is that a $2,000 suit? And the reality is, yeah, that's what that stuff costs, but it's also built to be durable to kind of do that. And even though I've done a lot of performance capture now, I don't think I've broken anything irreparably yet.
Yet.
Well, we're gonna keep.
I will
keep
always
an eye
put
on
that caveat. I'm large, so if I do slip and fall on something and land on it heavy, like it's 230 pounds, it's landing on something that it might just go, that's not, we're too delicate for that.
Fair enough.
Yeah, you kind of mentioned a little bit about some of the behind the scenes with the performance capture, the motion capture, and so on and so forth. I'm kind of curious about like some of the processes behind that. Like you mentioned before the show, how you had to shave the beard and stuff like that. Yeah, and how they had to essentially kind of like replace the beard on another actor's face just to make it kind of
Graham,
yeah. Like, what was that process like, especially in your case and perhaps some of your fellow coworkers' case and for the Order 1886?
Sure. So that was whatever it was, 7 years ago now, and that was kind of a kick because as far as they told us, the cameras and the equipment and the technology we were using was actually James Cameron's Avatar.
Oh wow!
Stuff that was in between things because it was Sony, so they had it. So that was what we were told. I'm not 100% sure that was completely true. It might have been stuff that was used for some of it, but but it is basically the same now as it was then. It has obviously got better, but the process of it is basically the same. It's the suit with the reflective balls on it that is not flattering on anybody unless you happen to be built like a cartoon character. It's the kind of thing where if you look wrong in real clothes because you're so overly proportioned, male or female, one way or another, you might actually look okay in that outfit, but it's kind of like a wetsuit. It doesn't look good on almost anybody.
Yeah.
And then it has all the little reflective balls on it. And then you have, this head cam on, which means that you've got an arm that's right here. So there's a thing right here with a light on it, which is shining right into your eyes, but you're having to look past it to talk to people and not stare straight down the barrel of it.
Jeez.
And then you have all these dots on your faces, which are put on with makeup that you have to try and make sure don't sweat off and come off. That has all got a little smoother as time has gone on. There's some where you have to have like 150 dots, somewhere you only have to have like 30 dots.
Wow.
The makeup artists, sometimes they're good at putting it on where it's easy to get off. Sometimes it's impossible to get off. But there's things that come in of like you get told ahead of time, don't put on any makeup for women, don't put on any moisturizer or anything, don't put on sunblock or anything on your face because that makes it all come off.
Right.
I listened to that at first. It turns out that my skin holds on to makeup like it is its child. And so like when I have a performance capture thing, I just have dots on my face for the next 2 days.
Jesus.
But yeah, they sort of get all put on. And the funny thing was, as I mentioned before we started, usually you have to shave unless you have facial hair or something that is part of another thing you're doing that can't change. So in that instance, Graham was on Outlander at the time, or still is. I don't know if the show's still running. I think it is. Was on Outlander, so he couldn't shave because the beard was part of the character, and he couldn't shave and grow it back in a week.
Right.
So they painted the dots on the beard, which of course is not where his face is, and it doesn't move like his face. And as and I remember saying to the guys at the studio, well, his character it's his face and his character has the beard, so how does it not work to just use that? And they said, well, in order for it to look real, we have to build the face and the bone structure and the muscles and the skin on top of it. That has to move the way we built like a regular human. Then we have to add hair onto it so it moves properly. If we just use these dots and attach them to the beard, it's going to move wrong. We can't attach them to the skin because that's not the skin, it's going to move wrong. So what we have to do is we have to do that, then take the dots we have, figure out frame by frame where they should be on his face if there was no hair there, go through like keyframe, do that, then animate that, then go and add the beard on top of that so that it looks like he looks regularly. So it's this weird thing of, even though he has the beard on in real life that he has on in the game, they had to take it off in the computer to be able to animate it properly, to be able to put it back on so it looked natural and it wasn't just moving like it's its own creature.
Yeah, that's
a
insane.
lot.
Yeah, because
it's a lot of work.
Because you see a lot of characters in games where they might have that beard, but I never knew kind of the process about how they were able to bring that into a game, and whether or not they either do the work of just capturing the entire face beard included or having to do extra processes in between. But to hear some of the behind the scenes is kind of crazy hearing it from you.
Yeah, they always want clean faces, so it doesn't matter what it is, even if it's Kratos in God of War or something who has that beard, like it doesn't. They need clean shaven to be able to add it on afterwards. Otherwise, it's just an epic amount of extra work for the animators and the devs.
Well, it sounds to me like whoever can figure out how to motion capture dots on a beard is going to be a very rich person.
If someone can figure out software that like extrapolates from like it's like, well, measure the length of the beard hair, or like it's like a thing of like measure how deep to the skin. Okay, then just put that in, and then it like shrink wraps it onto the model. Maybe
No, it always blows me away when you think about something like that you take for granted, right? All of the work that comes behind that.
Yeah.
We have all these crazy technological achievements like men on the moon and electric cars, but we can't record with beards yet. Just haven't reached that apex.
I've lived too long to not know this day would come.
Why, Alistair? You have forced us outside all these years.
I've seen things I am condemned to remember.
Tell me how it was voicing one of the iconic smaller character roles as Virgil in Fallout. It's a character that you can miss just playing the game, but somehow has found such a cult following of fans that love just the small interactions that they get with Virgil. What was it like coming up with the voice for him, and did you find it odd that it received so much kind of attention?
Absolutely, because full disclosure, I have never found myself in the game.
Really?
I have no idea how to get to myself. They sent me the game and I was like, well, I'll just get to me so I can see that bit.
Right.
I had to go on YouTube and pull the clips because I could not find myself no matter how hard I tried. So it's this massive open world game, and people have told me where I am. Like friends of mine called me and said, well, you're here. And I went, I have no idea how to get there. I have no idea. So, and I'm not good enough at games to be able to sort of play my way through it. I'm like, I get killed about a mile from the bunker every time I try. So eventually I'm like,
it's tough out there.
It's bad.
It is. A post-apocalyptic nuclear wasteland is apparently a tough place to work. Yeah. So that was a job that I actually got right after I'd moved to LA, and was one where it was a good example of, I had no idea what it was going in. It was under a working title. The character names were different, all that kind of stuff. And I remember in the session asking, can you tell me what this is? And they were like, kinda, we can tell you, but not really. Because it was like, that's such a big game and it takes so long to develop that, in some games, when you go into the session, they'll say, oh, it's this and you're doing this and you're doing this. That one, I think, because it took them so long in development because there's so much of it to build, they were a little more tentative about giving out too much information, even to the people working on it ahead of time, just because there was more time for stuff to slip out. So they gave me like little bits of information. And as I think I mentioned last time, like it was still vague enough that I looked at it. And at one point I went, because here's the thing, I'm looking at it and it is a brilliant scientist who had something happen to him, and now he's a giant green mutant musclehead rage monster. It kind of seems like it might be the Incredible, and they were like, stop, don't say what you're about to say. It's not that. It has nothing to do with that. Do not mention any of that IP. It is not connected. No, we don't want to have any of that interaction. I was like, oh, okay, I'm just trying to get a beat on it. They're like, appreciate that. That's not what this is. It is a different property. It happens to have a vague like backstory that is not dissimilar, but it's totally different. It's not a big green rage monster. He's not destroying and smashing things. He's just kind of there and annoyed that he now looks like a foot. I'm like, okay, cool. Still don't quite know what I'm doing, but great. So I have to admit, when it came to coming up with the voice for Virgil when he is in his mutant state, there was a little bit of, okay, well, what is like the Hulk? I went like, well, just because it was what was in my head, I went to kind of the Hulk voice from like the Lou Ferrigno Hulk from the 80s. I like started there, and then I went, but he still has all of his intelligence, and he's just now grumpy because of what happened to him. So I then took that and made it a little clearer and a little more, made him sound a little more educated, and then also said, okay, but he, because I have to have something that sound. We weren't going for, he's a 7-foot muscle man, but has this absurd voice that doesn't match him because that's funny. Yeah. It was like, no, it's got to sound like this. Because I went, okay. So that was kind of where that one started to come from, was starting there and then making tweaks to it based on the stuff that I saw.
Right.
I didn't have a lot of understanding of it when I was doing it because we didn't have too much information. And then when the game came out and they, as I said, they sent me a copy. I played it. I couldn't find myself. When it went up online, I found it. And then people started people I would meet would say, well, what have you worked on? And I would say, well, I did this and this. I was on Fallout. They said, oh, what in Fallout? I said, there's this little character Virgil thing. And they went, wait, I love Virgil. And I went, really? I mean, it was fun to do, but it's just, okay, cool. And so it was kind of crazy, and it was really instructive for me, especially for an early thing that I did in gaming, to see a smaller character like that grabs people's attention, because it really helps it really helped me to understand that no matter what the character was I was doing in a game or in anything, to go, even if it's a small character, even if it's not part of the main storyline, if it's a side mission, it's a backstory, it's a postscript, it's a something or other, it might be something that people just really catch on to and enjoy. So it helps to go like, oh, that's the whole thing of like, oh, I can be as creative or as crazy or whatever as I want with even these smaller ones, because sometimes those are the ones that really just catch people's imagination, and that was really cool to learn.
You will not save them from their judgment.
Doom Eternal.
Yes.
So for people who don't know, I imagine a lot of people do know at this point, but if they don't, you did the voice of several characters in that game, including the Doom guy / Doomslayer himself. Yeah. So I'm kind of curious about like, what was the fan reaction like to this if they found out about it? Because when it comes to characters who have a history of not having a voice, and then they get a voice, discussions around it can be contentious, putting it lightly. And
a little bit,
just a little bit. And I'll be honest in saying that I'm guilty of it myself.
I think we all are.
I'll just say, listen, if you make Link have full conversations in the next Zelda, we might have some unpleasant words exchanged. But besides that, like, what is the reaction been like with people who now know or perhaps don't know yet that you've been the voice of the Doom guy?
It's interesting. That was another one where I did not know going into the session what exactly it was. Mm-hmm. And I kind of didn't realize even when I was doing it. At the end of like the first session, a couple of the guys from the studio said, hey, we want to get a photo and just of the session and stuff like that. And we were like, okay, cool. And then it was mentioned like, yeah, he's never had a voice before. And I sort of went, wait, exactly what are we talking about? And they said, no, this is Doom guy from the Doom thing where he's going to speak in this one. And I went, boy, I'm glad I didn't know about that.
Yeah, right?
Cool. Yeah. Because I just came in and, did what I'd done in the audition. And in the audition, it didn't specify, it didn't say, this is the voice of Doom guy.
Yeah.
So I just came in and did what I'd done ahead and was able to just sort of do it. And he doesn't have a ton of speaking, which makes sense for him to go from silent to all of a sudden, Robert Downey Jr.'s Iron Man would be weird. But it was nice that I didn't know going in for the first session. And so that by the time the game came out, I realized immediately, I went, oh, people are either going to love me or hate me, most likely both.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's the thing of always, it's like, well, most people are going to, if they don't like it, are going to be mad at the developer for having made him talk, because obviously I had no control of that. But still, there's always going to be people who go, well, he could have had a voice, but that guy is terrible. I don't like it. I wanted to sound like this. I wanted to sound like that. It's, that's strangely, for me at least, really easy to deal with, because I'm like, no one likes everything. There's stuff that everyone else loves that I go, I know I'm wrong, but I don't like that.
Yeah.
I don't like that person in it. I don't like that character. I don't like whatever it is.
Same.
So that's kind of easy for me to go, that's fine. Like, if everybody liked it, I would be worried that like the entire community was about to screw me over somehow.
Yep. Yeah. I hear you on that.
Because something's wrong.
Yeah.
Right.
So that was one where I was really able to actually just enjoy going, oh, I got to do this, which is awesome. I got to do it for kind of the first time, which is awesome. And I know, and go, some people are going to love it, some people are going to hate it, and some people are going to hate it because they didn't want him to speak at all. Some people are going to hate it because they just didn't like what I did with it.
Right.
Cool. That's fine. That's not my problem. And if they really don't like part of it because of how I did it, I'm sorry. That was what I came up with, and that was what the developers decided they liked. Better luck next time.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, in my case, I would say it's fine. I had no problem with it whatsoever, so I'll speak on my behalf about that. But
yeah,
I just kind of wanted to hear like the kind of the mindset about that, because I know when it comes to stuff like this, like I said, it can be very contentious. People have very strong opinions when it comes to it, and you never know how they're going to react to it when when the stuff comes out. So I appreciate you answering that.
And like, there's certain ones that are probably harder if there is a very established voice that's been doing it and you're taking it over, whether that person decided they didn't want to do it anymore, that person passed away, that person couldn't come to a deal with the producers or something, and so they're replacing them. Yeah. That can be way harder, because especially if you're being brought in to voice match somebody,
right?
Yeah,
it's like, then you're going, I'm not getting to choose a lot of the creative direction of this to begin with. I want the job. I'm happy to have the job. I'm doing the best I can, and kind of, I'm happy to have it, but everyone's a little put off about the situation because, but even there, you're always kind of, you're just doing the best you can.
Yeah.
And,
right. Yeah. It seems to be something that we're seeing more and more of as voice actors kind of become more prominent. We had David Hayter and the Kiefer Sutherland, kind of thing there. And that kind of goes back to something we talked about before, is like taking ownership of a character. David Hayter's been Snake for, over a decade, 2 decades, 3 decades.
Yeah.
And, the community, like you said, was really split. Some people didn't mind. A lot of people that are like loyal fans of the voice actors, which is great. I'm glad voice actors are really kind of getting into the spotlight. Nowadays, as before they were kind of voice acted by people in the studio,
right.
that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so that was a great question, and happy to see you voice a character in such an iconic series. Like from when I was a kid, my dad was playing that.
And that was the thing. Like with Doom, it was one where I went, oh, the first time I saw it was when I was in boarding school in England, and the one really rich kid who had his own laptop at the time, like an Intel 486 that actually had a color LCD screen, and he had Doom on it. He had like Doom and like the original Wolfenstein on it, with the two shooters. And so Doom was one of the first ones that I knew post like the Nintendo and the Super Nintendo stuff.
Right.
And so to then find out like, oh, I'm getting to voice that is awesome. Like I said, because I think there's been a little bit of like nudges at voices before, but this is the first time he was officially like speaking.
Right.
It both there's an intimidating thing to it, but also it's like, okay, I'm not taking over from anybody. I just get to do the thing that I do.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That makes it a little smoother.
Yeah.
Right.
Guts. Huge guts. Kill them. Must kill them all.
He has fight in him yet.
So something that I really enjoyed in our last talk that I got to bring up during this one is the preparation and the execution for Torque in Call of Duty.
Right.
Really enjoyed the conversation we had about that, and I'd love for people to hear that. So can you tell us a little bit about how you landed Torque, how you came up with the voice, and kind of the background of creating such a like a gruff and rough character as opposed to some of the more subdued roles that you've had?
Yeah, sure. So, and I'll try and remember. I'll try and make sure I'm able to cover all the stuff that I covered last time. Watch as something completely different comes to mind, and you're like, "That's not what you said before. You're lying." But I'll hopefully it stays. It is still the same story in my mind. So, I've done some stuff for Call of. I've been really fortunate. Call of Duty has been really good to me and to my wife. We've both done a bunch of stuff in a number of Call of Duty iterations, and that was one where the audition went out, and the auditions for Call of Duty or a lot of those first-person shooters are similar in terms of you know what they're for, and you know that you have to be able to do the call-outs in a way that works, that can cut through the mix that people can hear. So one of the first things is making sure that you're doing the call-out bits, the grenade out, weapon here, I'm hit, helo, things like that in a way that works. So you take that and then you look at the character and come up with something that kind of seems to work. And from the description of Talk, what we had was kind of what you have when you see his bio in the game of, the Scottish guy who had, joined the military and was not necessarily great with authority, and then had seen one of his superior officers not treating people well, and had, epicacked his tea or something or other, and got thrown in the brig for that. And so one of the things that I for some reason it just jumped to my mind was when I was at school in England, we had a thing called CCF, which is Combined Cadet Force, which is kind of like the equivalent of junior ROTC over here. Right. And so we had on one of our field weeks or field weekends, we were sent to one of the regiments that our particular cadet force was attached to for field week, and we were kind of run around by the squaddies, the enlisted guys. And so this would have been in the early 90s, and I don't know, 93, 94. And on one of the times that we did it, one of the guys was this little Irish guy who was just real angry. Not in real life, not like as a human being, but like he was doing the sort of the drill sergeant, wasn't a sergeant, he was a corporal, I think, but doing the angry soldier thing, especially because he had all of these, spoiled brat kids who were there. And I don't remember what had happened, but a friend of mine, like 2 people down from me, had buggered something up. He'd messed up cleaning his gun. He'd broken this. I don't remember what it was, but this guy, the soldier was just screaming at him, and my friend was getting really nervous and suddenly had the moment of being like, he was like, I gotta shift attention. So he was like, Matthew's American. And unbeknownst to me, this soldier had these guys had all fought in the first Gulf War, and this soldier had, I don't know what it was, but he had a not positive interaction with U.S. forces in the first Gulf War. So while that should have been a nakedly obvious attempt to distract him by my friend, it didn't matter. He just went and came straight over to me and just. And like my life was hell for the next 4 days. It was one of those things, if it didn't upset me or like annoy me or wasn't difficult for me, because I knew what it was. And also it was very clear that this was kind of an act he was running. Yeah. Right. But something about it came back when I read the Talk thing, and I went, oh, I can use that guy's personality in Talk. I just need to switch him from Irish to Scottish. And then I can take that, and then it became really easy, because I'm like, oh, this isn't just some person that I'm basing it on. It's actually a squaddie, a British, a British combat veteran soldier from the 90s that I'm basing the character on, the personality on. Right. I'm changing it enough to make him Scottish and softening him here, hardening him here, but it gave me a really easy way to go. That's my North Star for the character, and I could just kind of then go, because I didn't have to think like, well, how would this work? I went, no, that's what this guy would do. That's how he would see this. This how he would react. Because with all of the kind of like because the guy was kind of doing it as a character even for us, but it any kind of drill sergeant or anything like that, there was the absolute unmerciful ball busting, but it was always mixed with humor. Yeah. Like it was never just screaming at you that, you're worthless scum. It was always comedic. It was always like, the point was always to make people laugh and then yell at them for laughing. Right. It's like, you're supposed to stay quiet. What are you doing? Oh, you think this is funny? Right. You're next. Right.
I think that's, really why I enjoyed the story. It has a lot of personality to it, and it adds a bit to, you know, these iconic Call of Duty voices, which you just really nailed. You know, you've got Captain Price and Ghost, and they all have these accents that Call of Duty players kind of like latch onto. And when we introduced ourselves to operators and specific characters in some of the newer games, people were a little bit apprehensive about how that was going to be. And to see these characters actually have some personality really kind of put some people at ease. Like, okay, well, if he's going to be like Torque, that's fine. We can accept these characters like that. So definitely enjoyed that.
Yeah, and that was the funny thing. Like, I kind of had that going in, and then when I got into the studio and they said, "Oh, and by the way, here's what the character looks like," and, you know, showed me the screen, I went, "Oh, he's like a 6'4" ginger guy with a big red beard." I went, "All right, cool. I can do that." I got it. I'm like, so tone-wise, he's like this tone, and then I just put the character stuff on it. They're like, "Yeah, you just do that and you're fine." I went, "Cool, all right."
This seems like an easier one for you to pick up.
Yeah, I was like, "Oh, that one's fine. Okay, cool. I'll need to make sure I don't, you know, bollocks up the Scottish too bad." But even it's funny, even there's a funny thing, and I didn't really get this. My agent actually had mentioned this to me at one point. She said about, and I don't remember what it was. She said about something. She's like, "Well, you have the right kind of English accent." I said, "What does that mean?" She goes, "Well, because you're half American, half English, you can go in and out of either of them, but your normal talking voice at this point is not like completely English or completely." Right. The thing is, for games or for animation, but she's like, especially for games, things that are going to be across the entire English-speaking world. She said, a lot of the time, if it's too heavy into something, it is a little off-putting for people. She's like, so a lot of the time, you know, that when it's a little more, it's a little softer, it helps, because then they don't have to worry about people understanding it in different places. Like, you know, the hysterical thing of like Train Spotting, when they had to put subtitles below some of it, because it's like, if you don't come from Scotland or you aren't used to listening to it, you are not going to understand what those guys are saying.
Yeah, for sure. I mentioned to you, previously, I working on a Halo fan-made audiobook. My narrator is Irish. I cannot understand anything she says to me regularly, but as soon as she voices the narration, I can understand her perfectly. It's good to be able to go, you know, in and out of those different tones. So again, thank you for sharing that story. I loved it last time, loved it again this time. I know that the community will like that one as well.
Story. A lot of the characters you voice in Halo have been part of the deeper lore of the series overall, in terms of the extended Halo universe. When it comes to like Douglas 042 and Halo Wars, and some voices in the Covenant, and so on and so forth. So instead of asking what, you know, it was like doing those roles, I kind of want to dig a little deeper beyond that and ask you what the Halo universe means to you as somebody who has done voices or you know, brought life to characters within that universe.
So the interesting thing with Halo is that we have a PlayStation, and we have not stretched to buy both systems at the moment. So I have the Halo games that I've done. I don't have the thing to play them on, which means that my exposure to Halo has been almost entirely narrative.
Oh, wow.
So I know what I know from having seen stuff, having read stuff, having, you know, seen character descriptions, having seen story, you know, the stories written out, things like that. So I know it purely as IP, as opposed to the player mechanics part of it.
Yeah.
Right.
And I don't think that hasn't been better or worse. That's just what my exposure to it's been so far. I'm sure at some point when we decide that, you know, we've finished paying for all the children's things, we'll go like, we're just going to get one of everything, because, you know, they're on their own now.
Yeah.
At the moment, we got to feed them and put them in school and stuff. Yeah. Apparently that's something you legally have to do. I didn't know that beforehand. Right. So the thing that's been cool about Halo was, obviously it's another one. It's one of the massive IPs that once the first one came out, you were aware of it. If you had any sort of cultural references at all, you knew what it was.
Yeah.
And unlike, you know, it kind of fills a similar space to Call of Duty, in that it's one of the two or three massive like first person military shooters.
Oh yeah.
But Halo has had this sort of holistic universe that it's created, as opposed to the Call of Duties, where they're usually individual things. Each game, whether it's Black Ops or the history ones or anything like that, they're similar in tone, but each one is kind of unique, and there's some carryovers, but they're sort of a walled off garden to a certain extent.
True.
Whereas Halo, every time they've had one, it's just kind of expanded the universe and deepened it. Which, and that's the thing, having Master Chief and having Cortana has these constants through it has enabled them to just keep layering in story and just keep layering in character, which is something that you don't often get the equivalent depth in first-person shooters, because you don't have the time. You don't have that many years. You don't have that many games. You don't have that many different versions of it, whether it's a first-person shooter or a strategy game or things like that, to build that in. So it's meant that some of the characters, like the Douglas character, which is not primary character, is not the primary character, they get to start getting a background, because even if they're just dropping a couple of things for these dozen or so characters per game,
right,
after however many games and however many 20 years or whatever now that they're in, that's a lot of background and a lot of information. And at a certain point, it's enough that people start going, yeah, but that one is now really interesting, so we want more on that. And so they go, great, cool, here's more on that guy, here's more on that girl.
They're going crazy with the books nowadays.
Oh yeah, they definitely are.
It's really cool, and it's really unusual for like a game like this to get the ability to do that, and to have characters where they can do that beyond the main couple of characters, like the main protagonist, antagonist, and one or two helpers. Like, to be able to start fleshing it out to that extent is really unusual, and is one of the things that makes Halo really, really cool.
Absolutely, I agree 100%.
Definitely. I think this is a perfect chance for us to segue into another topic that we talked about last time, which was specifically in Halo, you voicing Douglas during the Halo Wars 2 cutscene. So I want to dive back into there and talk to you just about, and I told you this last time, just the incredible kind of tone and acting that you really brought to one of the most iconic scenes. Anybody asks me what's my favorite scene in Halo, it could be from any one of the numbered titles, but I always go back to the Halo Wars 2 intro to Atriox, where Douglas just gets mauled by Atriox.
It's ragdoll.
Yeah, it's horrible, man.
The subtle tones that you bring to that of a man who is not afraid but is also worried at the same time just really kind of hit home. And a lot of like normal people that watch the game and they're just there to play the game will miss it, but voice actor enthusiasts like myself and the people that watch our show, they'll note that subtle hint in the voice. It's not necessarily like a quiver, but it's just like a hint of doubt on top of like a hardened steel character. So tell me a little bit about voicing Douglas in general, and then maybe a little bit about that scene if you can.
Sure. So that scene is interesting, because the way it came about, because that was the first thing I did. And at the time, and I think I told you this before, my memory is at the time at which I did it, I don't know whether this was the actual case or what I was what I was kind of led to believe, or the impression I was under, was that we were just doing a trailer for a forthcoming game. I didn't know that it was going to be part and parcel of it as well. And my memory is that it came out as like a teaser or something for the game ahead of time. And so we had that scene, and the whole part of it is as it was explained and things like that. And when I was sort of watching the animatic or watching the stuff for it for the first time, I was like, okay, well, which one am I? And Dirk was like, you're that one who's getting all kinds of fucked up. I was like, oh, yeah, that's not something I've seen, but I haven't seen a Spartan get destroyed like that by a single other entity before.
Yeah.
Like that's not that has not been my experience of what generally happens to them.
Yeah, it's very Hulk and Loki from Marvel.
Exactly. Yeah. So it made it kind of interesting, because then it was a case of like going, okay, well, what are these guys? What are they're not invincible, but they're head and shoulders above, in terms of capability, everybody else in general. Right. So, and that because they're not invincible, it's not this, blind assumption that nothing bad is ever going to happen. There's the understanding of like, no, we can get into trouble and bad things can happen, but that happening the way it did of, oh, there's one enemy that just showed up, great, well, we'll take this shouldn't be a thing. Oh, this is more difficult than we thought. Well, now I don't know what the hell's happening because this is not how this is supposed to go.
Right.
But like you said, it's not necessarily a fear. It's like it's a confusion. It's like this is the first time. This might be the first time that I've ever not actually known what to do next.
Right.
Gotcha.
Like it's a thing of taking a character who they've almost certainly been in situations where they went, the chances are we're not going to survive. So they've been through that before. But it's one thing if you're outnumbered 100-1, or you're like, I might end up getting left on here so that everyone else can get off, and then this whole thing explodes and we're gone. Yeah. It's very different to be like, I'm losing a one-on-one fight with somebody. That's never happened before.
Right.
I don't know what this thing is, and I don't know how it's capable of doing this. Nothing is supposed to be able to have this kind of effect on with 3 or 4 of us. That's kind of there's almost like a naive confusion there.
Yeah.
I don't what. How? Huh?
It's something I wanted to follow up on, and I didn't ask this last time, but after our interview, I had to go back and rewatch the clip. For you doing the I forget the name that the voice actors call it, but the grunts and the groans and those kind of things, the expressions. How was that for you to get right? It seems to something that's incredibly hard to act on the fly, to grunt in pain while not being in pain. And you really kind of nailed those. Like I watched it a couple of times where there's a certain part where Atriox kind of grabs him and crumples him down, and you make these guttural kind of noises. How difficult was that for you to do, or is that something that you've kind of learned from experience and can kind of flow in and out of?
Well, the older I get and the more everything hurts, the easier it is to fly, I gotta be honest.
Stop it. We were just talking about we're getting old, and the light was shining on my hair. I'm like, I got some
more gray hairs than usual, man, I'm telling you.
Yeah, it's a weird thing of like, I'm like, I don't feel like I've aged that much visually, but I'm like, when I hit 40, all of a sudden things hurt, and people are like, yeah, that's just gonna hurt from now on. That doesn't get better. I'm like, damn it. Okay. But those kind of things, the efforts, the impacts, whether it's taking or giving, things like that, a lot of it is stuff that there's a couple of ways that you can pick it up and get facile with it. Either it's watching a ton of it and actually paying attention to it so that you kind of know, like, oh, what? Yeah, okay, I can watch a scene and go, oh yeah, cool. And whether it's a game or a movie or TV shows, okay, cool. That sounds realistic. But what are they actually doing? What is the sound that comes out when John Wick gets punched in the solar plexus? What is the sound that the guy makes when he bangs his head against a banister or something? Like what are the actual sounds? Not like, oh yeah, that sounds right. That sounds okay to my ear.
Yeah.
The other one is, and then the other more experiential one is, if you've done combat sports, if you've played American football, if you've played rugby, if you like things where you've been hit, you've hit people, you've heard people next to you you're like, I know what it sounds like when somebody gets speared by a 250-pound guy running at full speed when they're not expecting it. I know what it sounds like when somebody gets picked up and slammed into the ground from 5 just picked up and slammed down. Like, you whether you realize it or not, spending years being around impacts, you start to go like, oh no, that's not what that sounds like. Like, and what the sound is when somebody hits the ground hard, and there's the immediate, and then there's the everything tightens, your solar plexus tightens, and you lose your air for a bit. The sound of like trying to get your air back.
Yeah.
You know what it sounds like when your arm gets wrenched and it doesn't dislocate or break it, but you go, that's gonna be uncomfortable.
Right.
The sounds you make when it's like, no, that's not broken, but that sucked. So you can pick it up either from watching it, or the recent one was during the pandemic. If you watch mixed martial arts, the fights that they had with no crowds, where you actually hear the impacts, you're like, oh yeah, that's like, you don't hear it a lot of the time when it's in a stadium full of people, whether it's a mixed martial arts or a boxing thing. You don't hear it that often, and it's always a thing of when there's a thing where you hear it, everyone goes, oh, and you're like, oh, I don't hear most of the impact, so that sounded particularly brutal.
Yeah.
But the ones the last couple of years when there were no crowds and you could hear what impact sounded like, that was kind of interesting to watch and go like, oh, okay, yeah, those are sounds that we can use, or those are sounds we get right, and those are sounds which, if I make this, that doesn't work. So a lot of the time doing a scene like that, you're watching it and you're going, okay, what's happening here? This is happening. Well, and you're not having that happen, but if you're thinking if somebody's grabbing you by the head and wrenching you around, you kind of do that and see what sound comes out.
Gotcha. So it's a little bit of physicality there in the booth.
There's a little bit of it. Like if it's, and if you watch somebody doing it, if you're doing the sounds of like getting hit in the stomach, it's unlikely that someone's just going to stand there and be like, like you're going to you're doing this because it sounds
very believable. And I wanted to send somebody to check on you after I watched it.
Is he okay?
Yeah, right. I think one of the most kind of iconic moments that we've had on the show was correct me if I'm wrong, Alex. We were speaking to David Hayter when he did Republique, and there's this part where somebody had to get strangled, so he had somebody actually pretend to strangle him in the booth so he could get those sounds. So it sounds like you bring a little physicality to the booth, can really kind of produce these believable moments.
Absolutely.
I mean, some of the really tough ones are drowning. And that happens in a lot of games, like especially in a lot of the first person shooter type things where your character can die a myriad of ways. And so like when you drownings are sometimes a thing of like, okay, you put water in your mouth and you're trying to, and it's like, okay, keep the water off the $3,000 microphone. These days, in the COVID days, it's even more of like you don't want people spitting water around the studio. That's not great. It wasn't great beforehand, but it's worse now. Yeah. But like there are things like that where you're just putting some water in your mouth to make it sound like you're drowning.
Gotcha. Yeah. Alex, you want to take the next question and then we'll move on to wrap up?
Yeah, I just kind of want to touch back before we get into the question. To touch back on the the impacts and sounds and stuff like that in games. Like that kind of resonated with me a little bit as somebody who. When I was younger, I used to ride my bike a lot when I was younger. And a lot of times I would just ride for scenic reasons and stuff like that. But I had one instance where I had mistakenly hit a really bad bump in the road. And front of the bike, like the entire front, then the handlebars turned back towards me. And the handlebar hit me right into the stomach. And it knocked all of the air out of me where I couldn't breathe for about a good 5 or 6 seconds. Yeah. And that was... It's really unpleasant. It's one of those really unpleasant moments for sure. Yeah, it's not like getting winded is not nice. It's not nice.
Like when you're a kid and I remember the first time it happens, you're like, I'm dying.
Yes.
I'm never gonna breathe again.
Yes, that's what it was immediately in that moment. So obviously, you've got experience voicing a wide variety of characters. We talked about video games. I know you've done voices in the animated Castlevania series and so on and so forth. But I'm kind of curious about, with all that experience, what would you say has been either the biggest challenge or learning point for you overall in your experience so far?
Well, interesting with going on from the last ones, but the learning how to do a lot of the high stress things and be able to do them for a prolonged period without totally wrecking your voice is not easy. It's really not easy. And I was fortunate in the theater training I had helped a lot, because when they say like, if you end up doing a Shakespeare tragedy where you're yelling and screaming and fighting for a 3-hour play 8 times a week, if you don't know what you're doing in a week and a half, you're not going to be able to speak.
Yeah.
Right.
Which happens to people. Like that happens to people who don't have theater training. They're used to film or TV and they go and do that. They lose their voices. So that helped, like having that helped a lot. But still, when you come to the end of it, a session where you're just doing screams and fight sounds and both attacks and impacts and then all the death sounds, all that kind of stuff. I had one, just a couple of days ago where, and it through my voice was, I was not able to record, like I'd been working on an audiobook and I couldn't do the audiobook that night because my voice just didn't sound the same. I was an octave lower.
Oh, wow.
And my voice was fine. it recovered the next day. I wasn't quite as careful with it as I should have been that session.
Yeah.
But it was, like I said, it was fine the next day. But that evening on Friday night, I was like, I can't do another hour or so on this audiobook because my voice just doesn't sound the same because I spent a few hours doing a lot of projection.
Yeah.
Learning to do that, I was fortunate in that I had a little bit of ability with it just because of my training going in, but I also had to figure that out. Some of the, one of the most helpful experiences I had was an animated film I did that was an animated film with the Incredible Hulk, which was voiced by Fred Tatasciore, who Fred can do.
He's nuts.
He's just built different. He can just do a 4-hour session as Hulk and then be fine and go do another one.
Yeah.
I don't, and like, I've done a bunch of stuff with Fred. I've been around him a decent amount, and having done that movie with him where we had a couple of sessions or a few sessions of 4-hour sessions, just watching him do that for hours on end and going like, okay, what is he doing? How's he doing it? And I can't do what he does.
Yeah.
But you can still learn a lot. And you can learn a lot from watching people and listening to people do stuff like that. So any chance that I have if I get to a session earlier, I'm able to stay later on a session, less now because we're doing everything at home. But when it was in studio, to watch what somebody else does or to talk to them, find out, especially the people who have done a lot of that stuff and have experience of it, being able to do those kinds of things and just reel them off one after another and not have your voice degrade is really important. And again, as I said earlier, for things like a Halo or Call of Duty, where you're apart from the story stuff, you're going to have just pages of call outs. Ahead left, ahead right, behind you, enemy left, enemy right, sniper, helicopter, drop, medic vac, all that kind of, and you're going to have to be able to knock off 2 or 3 in a row and just go down pages and pages of it. Being able to do that and just go through it and not have a problem and not have your voice degrade and not need to stop every 2 minutes to give your voice a chance to recover.
Yeah.
That's a big thing for studios and casting when they're looking for people, because they're like, no, we need to know that you can come in and do this and it's not going to be a problem or slow anything down.
Right.
So I was lucky that my training helped give me the background that let me do that, but that's also been something that I've had to consciously make sure I keep up on, because it's a perishable skill.
Yeah.
And you have to keep working on it and keep tweaking to make sure you keep your voice able to do that, because if you don't, you'll suddenly go into a session and find, oh crap, I can't do it.
I can't do it. Yeah. And one of the reasons why I like to ask this question for a lot of our guests is because you tend to get like very, varying answers about what they've learned in their experience and things like that. And I also ask this question for people that are watching who might be aspiring voice actors one day and stuff like that. These are lessons that they can learn. And feel free, if you want to elaborate more on this now, knowing this, by all means, feel free to do so. But it's part of one of the reasons why I like to ask these questions, because of the varying answers and the lessons that can be learned for people who want to do this stuff as well, for sure.
Yeah. Like the character stuff is a blast. It's, so much fun. But there's the kind of the yeoman's work part of it, which is this stuff, and it's the same on animation, because a lot of the time you'll finish the script and then it's like, okay, but there's a fight in it, or there's this, or we don't know if we need that, so we're going to need to go and capture running sounds, impact sounds, punching sounds, kicking sounds, because there is a fight and we don't know, it hasn't been boarded yet, we don't know how it's going to go.
Right.
And similarly, your character gets stabbed, or this happens, or your character's head gets cut off, or something or other. You need to be able to do these sounds, and you're going to need to be able to do them. And even if it's a case of it's at the end of your session, if you're lucky and things are going well, you might have multiple sessions in a day. So you can't, work yourself crazy at the end of a 2 or 3 or 4 hour session in the morning, and then know you've got a session in the afternoon and be like, well, I got through that session, but now my voice is wrecked for the rest of the day.
Yeah.
But oh crap, I've got a thing this afternoon, and it's supposed to be a smooth, even tempered voice. It's not supposed to sound like an orc or something where I can kind of cover.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, because that's one of the interesting things I find about stuff like this is just being able to recover, like taking time to recover your voice, because I've seen a lot of people that do this that end up losing their voices, and sometimes it doesn't necessarily recover the same way again, for sure.
No.
Yeah.
No, you can do yourself a lot of damage, and it can change the way you sound permanently, or it can accumulate if you don't adjust and start fixing it, and it can, you know, lead to a point where all of a sudden you have a doctor saying you can't do this stuff for 3 or 6 months or you will lose your voice. It's, I mean, and you hear it with singers as well. You hear, like, you know, singers who haven't got their technique quite right, and all of a sudden, you know, in the middle of a tour or something, a singer will be like, I have to not work for 2 months because I've strained my voice to the point where I need to not sing for a while, or I won't be able to do it anymore.
Will be consumed, regardless of what.
So the last one that I wanted to touch on is, we spoke a little bit about this before as well, and that is your role in Halo Infinite as the smart-ass Marine. As well, we'll go with. Tell me a little bit about working with Halo Infinite, how it was recording for that character, and you know, kind of how you approached that role.
Yeah, so that one was a blast, because that was one that I started doing before everything kind of shut down, and did through a lot of the last couple of years. And that one was so much fun because, I don't think that character has a name. It's just a Marine.
Right.
But once I came in and was doing it, and the director and I were talking, he said, you know, one of the things is that this is the character who, he said, it's not that he's given up. He's just a little more aware of how unlikely it is that any of them are going to live or survive, and he might be a little mad about it and a little frustrated about it. So it was kind of fun to be able to come in and have, you know, there be lines where it's like, oh, hey, Master Chief, nice of you to show up, kind of thing. Like, oh, you're here now. Yeah, no, feel free to go and do something. Kind of thing. And you know, the ones where, like, he would be being held hostage, you've been captured somewhere, and there's bits where it's like, they're just like, okay, so basically what's happening here is Master Chief has shown up, there's multiple cells of people, he's let some cells out, and then enemy arrived, so he's gone off fighting them, and you're in one of the cells that's not open yet. So as opposed to just the standard, like, hey, we're still here, come and get us, it's a, oh yeah, no, we're fine, it's great, it's, no, don't worry about us, we'll be good, I'm glad you let everyone else out, especially Steve. Steve.
Right, and that's what I was telling you, is that it was the Marines really kind of added personality back into Halo, which was severely lacking in the last two iterations of the game. And as soon as we talked about that, according to your IMDb, you're listed as additional voices on Halo Infinite. So I really wasn't sure who you were, but as soon as you kind of let off a couple of those lines, I remember playing the game and having you load up in a vehicle. You were saying something about where we were going, and then we'd get out, and you'd be like, "All right, where are you going?"
Yeah, yeah.
It kind of clicked immediately as soon as we were talking about that. Yeah. So
right.
One of the other things we mentioned is just about how many different iterations of dialogue you had for such a, you know, like a technical minor character, but with so much personality.
Well, yeah, and like you mentioned, you know, there's all of the stuff that can happen in terms of, you can get in a Jeep, you can get in a truck, you can get on a helicopter, or, you know, something to fly, something that, you know, train, or this or that. You can be part of, you know, an attacking group. You can be part of a hostage group. You can be part of a group saying, hell no, I'm not going out there. You can be on the verge of, you know, dead and being, you know, rescued. You can, and then there's stuff when it's not in the middle of combat, when it's just sort of walking around and interacting, stuff like that. So it was like a lot. I was kind of surprised at the amount of sessions it ended up being. I don't remember exactly, but I mean, I would say it was like half a dozen sessions to get everything for all of it. Because again, it's a big game, and there's so much world there that to get all of the stuff for all of the potential things that you run into. And because in this one, it was a, you know, these Marines had kind of been stuck there for a while. There was also a little bit of it had gone a little bit from, you know, the standard thing to the, well, we're all screwed. Oh, maybe we're not. Yeah, I don't know what the hell's going on. Like, it was the kind of thing of like, it was like, yeah, he'd kind of given up. Like, he wasn't suicidal, but he'd given up. He's like, no, we're all gonna die here. That's just what's gonna happen. Because we all signed up and we were stupid.
I think one of my favorite, I can't quote it verbatim because I'll mess it up, and I don't want to do it any injustice. But for those of you watching, find Matthew's character in the game and then give him a weapon that's not good.
Yeah.
And he comes back to you with this like this really smart ass rebuttal about the weapon that you give him. And that just at that point when I originally had loaded up the game and I was trying to gear up my Marines to take them out to do something, and I heard that kind of rebuttal. I was like, okay, Halo's back in a big way with these Marines. They add so much, and they contrast really well because you have some Marines that are like the gritty guys and they want to get in there and get it done, and you got the female Marines in there as well, and then you got your character who just I said just a breath of kind of fresh air in that area. So I wanted to tell you again, very very great job on.
Thank you. Yeah, that one was a blast. I was really really happy when I got in and they said, so like you said, it's like we have all the standard like tough gritty guys. You're kind of the sarcastic SOB, and I was like. Yes.
All right. Well, that about wraps it up for me. Ronan, you want to go ahead and ask any other questions you got, sir?
No, I think I'm good. We can probably get to some of those community questions if you got them.
Awesome. Cool. Sure. So one of the first ones, this is going to be kind of like the lightning round of a game show. So just quick in and out answers here. This gentleman combusted from the Installation 00 Discord wants to know how you adjust your technique and how you prepare for roles in general. Do you have any kind of like rituals or any kind of way that you kind of set up every time, or do you just kind of tackle them individually?
I don't. I don't have a standard approach. It's it always starts with whatever information we've been given. And that varies so much at this point, like whether it's games or animation or anything. Like the amount of information you have about a character can be anything from 2 lines and no visual reference to multiple visual references, the character's biography, the world, the storylines, copies, a couple of episode scripts. Like you can have such a varied difference in how much information you have to work with that it would be hard to have a single approach to it. Yeah. So all of it really comes down to taking whatever I'm given, and then a lot of the time, I got to be honest, my first thing is just literally what the first thing that comes to mind is. Is it, do I read this and go, oh, that reminds me of this person, this character, this thing, this whatever in my head that I start linking it to, or does it not remind me of anything? And then I've got to go, okay, so if I start trying to pull it apart and look in what I've got here, can I find something that gives me an idea and makes me go, oh, that reminds you of this guy from this, or that reminds me of that time I was, in this city and ran into a person at a bus stop that was like that. Like it's usually trying to find something that I go, oh, I can connect it to this character or this person to as an anchor for it. But it depends because, like I said, it's such a difference in how much information you get.
Right.
Given by the casting.
Wow. Very cool. Yeah, I like that. Rona, did you have any to add in, or do you want me to keep going?
Not at the moment. You can go ahead. Continue.
Okay. Next one comes from Dreg from the Installation 00 Discord as well. He wants to know, I'm about to reword this question because I already know you can't answer it as it is. Would you like to see Douglas role evolve, maybe something in a mainline game like Halo Infinite, or would you like to see him kind of keep in the reserve kind of character, the back end, things like Halo Wars, the spin-off games, that kind of thing?
I mean, look, anytime you get more stuff to do with the character, it's fun.
Yeah. So
if they were to come out and flesh him out and give him more stuff, it would be a blast. There's purely from a selfish point of view, I'm like, it would be interesting if they took like 4 or 5 of the other characters and gave them each their own thing,
right?
That they I'm like, yeah, just MCU that sumbitch, like and then eventually bring everyone back together again.
Yeah.
But
I think it could work for characters like Douglas. They already have, especially in the books. Douglas is much more prominent in the books and like the back end lore. And I think that's kind of where he was going with the question. The question he asked was, is Douglas going to be in Halo Infinite? Which we know with NDAs and all that kind of stuff.
We can't talk about that.
We can't really talk about that.
Yeah.
But I think it would be interesting in general if we got to see some different aspects. And I think Douglas, is kind of in a leadership position in Halo Wars 2. Obviously, he's injured and stuff like that. But in general, like in the lore wise, he's supposed to be, kind of the, one of the guys in charge. So I think it would give you more, opportunities in the voice, which I really love the limited opportunities we got to hear you as Douglas. We obviously really enjoyed that. So the next question, where'd it go? Excuse me. The next question comes from Hero. This was just a Reddit question on a voice acting forum. They wanted to know, do you have a preference in your type of acting? Do you prefer video games? Do you prefer animations or movies, that kind of thing?
These days, not really, because the writing and the breadth of story, whether it's in a video game or an animated series or an animated film or anything, like it's so consistent. Like I said earlier on, having an Emmy-winning screenwriter from the John Adams miniseries to write The Order, like you've got the writing is at this point, good material is good material, and there's so much good material in gaming and in animation and in all kinds of animation that it's not really a case of like, well, this is still better than the other. The fun one is when you get to do performance capture, which for the most part is video games. There are every now and then there's animated things that are motion capture, but for the most part, that's video games. So performance capture is always a blast. But in terms of which end product, no, they're all they're all fantastic at this point. They all have both excellent and questionable.
Right. Okay, well, that about wraps up all our community questions. A lot of these we answered as we were talking. So to wrap up, kind of similar to how we did last time, I've got a voice line for you. Ronan, did you have one that you'd like Matt to do? He did two for me last time, so I figured I'd split it with you if you have a particular character.
I thought about it for a second, but because I kind of want to hear what you guys had in mind first, so by all means, go ahead.
Yeah, so we're gonna go with Douglas. So this is Matthew Waterson, voice of Douglas 042, and you're watching the Codec.
Okay.
Give me 1 second. Let me make sure. I'm gonna make sure I triple record this one. All right.
Let me know when you're good to go.
I'm all set.
This is Matthew Waterson, voice of Douglas 042, and you're watching the Codec.